What if one of the most important factors in human health is something biology has largely overlooked? Not a vitamin, not a gene, not a new drug, but a set of physical processes happening at scales so small that, until recently, scientists had very few ways of studying them directly. It sounds like science fiction, but it's actually a question driving a growing field known as quantum biology. Quantum biology asks whether some biological processes depend on quantum effects, the same kind of phenomena that govern the behavior of atoms, electrons, and molecules at the smallest scales of nature. Now, before you imagine teleportation, time travel, other things that you might associate with the word quantum, that's not exactly what we're talking about here. This is a serious scientific field being investigated by chemists, biologists, engineers, physicists, clinicians, and more around the world. Despite decades of progress, a lot of the processes that are used to understand human health are still only partially understood. Aging, healing, inflammation, energy production, stress, these systems are incredibly complex, and scientists are still trying to understand how they function at their most fundamental level. So quantum biology asks a simple but profound question. Are some important biological mechanisms driven by interactions that can only be described by the laws of quantum physics? And if the answer is yes, what could that mean for human health? To understand why researchers are taking these questions seriously, first we need to understand why it was probably assumed that the answer was no. For a long time, quantum biology seemed unlikely, and the issue was biology. Historically, quantum effects were thought to be very fragile. When physicists study quantum effects, they usually work under highly controlled conditions, extremely cold temperatures, carefully isolated environments, vacuum chambers, shielding from outside interference. And the reason is simple. Quantum states can easily be disrupted by interactions with their surroundings. Physicists call this decoherence, and living systems seem like the worst possible environment for trying to avoid it. Cells are warm, they're messy, wet, they're crowded, millions of molecules are constantly colliding with one another, and chemical reactions are happening everywhere at once. So from that perspective, biology seems like one of the last places that delicate quantum states would survive. So for decades, many researchers assumed that quantum effects would disappear too quickly inside living systems to influence biology in any significant way. And this wasn't an unreasonable assumption. In fact, it was the dominant view. But science becomes interesting when observations challenge expectations. Over time, researchers began encountering biological phenomena that were too difficult to explain using existing models alone. And at the same time, advances in physics showed that some quantum effects could persist under a wider range of conditions than scientists had previously imagined. And none of this proved that biology was using quantum effects, but it reopened a question that many people had already thought to be answered. Could biology actually be taking advantage of quantum phenomena? At first glance, this might seem like a purely academic question. Even if quantum effects occur somewhere in our biology, why should it matter for human health? And the answer is surprisingly simple. Much of biology depends on electrons. Every second of every day, your cells are producing energy, repairing damage, responding to stress, regulating inflammation, and communicating with one another. Many of these processes depend on electrons moving between molecules, and electrons are quantum objects. That doesn't automatically make biology quantum, but it does mean that if quantum effects influence our biology anywhere, some of the most important places to look are the systems built around electron transfer and electron chemistry, because many of the systems most important for health depend on exactly the kinds of reactions where quantum effects could, in principle, matter. One area to think about is oxidative stress. You've probably heard the term before. Oxidative stress is often discussed in connection with inflammation, aging, and disease. Inside your cells, normal biological activity produces molecules known as reactive oxygen species, often abbreviated as ROS. And these molecules have a reputation for causing damage. And it's true, excessive levels of ROS can damage proteins, lipids, DNA, and other cellular structures. This is called oxidative stress, and it's implicated in a wide range of diseases from cancer to neurodegeneration to cardiovascular disease. But that's only part of the story. Reactive oxygen species are also essential to life. Cells use them for signaling, the immune system uses them to fight pathogens, and many biological processes depend on carefully regulated levels of ROS. It's about maintaining balance. Too little can be harmful, and too much can also be harmful. This is where quantum biology begins to intersect with health. Many reactions involving reactive oxygen species also involve electrons, and some researchers have proposed that certain electron-driven reactions may also be sensitive to quantum effects. This doesn't mean quantum biology explains aging, This doesn't mean that quantum effects are responsible for disease, but it does mean that there are scientifically plausible reasons to investigate whether quantum processes contribute to biological systems involved in health and disease, and to decipher how these quantum degrees of freedom can be controlled for therapeutic conditions. One of the leading ideas in the field involves something called the radical pair mechanism. And here's the core concept. Certain chemical reactions can create pairs of molecules containing unpaired electrons. And electrons possess a quantum property known as spin. The spin states of those electrons can influence what chemical products the reaction ultimately generates. And here's a video that goes into a bit more detail if you're curious. And researchers have shown that magnetic fields can influence radical pair reactions under certain conditions. This is one reason why radical pair chemistry has become one of the most studied mechanisms in quantum biology. It provides a plausible pathway through which quantum effects could influence biological chemistry. So a tiny shift at the level of an electron spin could influence chemistry. And biology is full of amplification mechanisms, where smaller molecular changes can eventually produce much larger biological effects. So if quantum processes are at all relevant to human physiology, how important are they? One reason this question has attracted attention involves magnetic fields. Earth's magnetic field is very weak, roughly 50 microtesla. To put that into perspective, a refrigerator magnet is much stronger, and an MRI scanner is tens of thousands of times stronger. From a classical perspective, a field this weak shouldn't have the energy or ability to affect biological chemistry at all. There's a related concept in biophysics called the thermal noise problem. The natural thermal energy inside your body is constantly jostling molecules around. Any effect produced by an extremely weak magnetic field should, in theory, be overwhelmed by all that background activity. It's a little bit like trying to whisper inside of a hurricane. And yet for over 50 years, researchers have been gathering evidence that weak magnetic fields can alter biological processes in ways that classical physics struggles to explain. These effects have been observed across multiple cells, including human cells, and across organisms in the whole tree of life. They include changes in ion channel functioning, regulation of oxidative stress, DNA repair efficiency, and cellular proliferation. Even more puzzling, in many of these biological responses, increasing the magnetic field to very large values doesn't really create a larger effect. Many of the variation is seen in magnetic fields that are smaller or comparable to that of your iPhone. That paradox is exactly what the radical pair mechanism can resolve. In the radical pair mechanism theory, varying the field strength isn't going to produce different biological effects only in a limited magnetic field range, reaching a point where increasing the field doesn't induce any further change. The physics works, but only if quantum coherence is preserved long enough for it to matter, which is central to the questions that researchers are now working directly to figure out. A 2024 study reported that developing frog embryos, Xenopus laevis, raised in a shielded environment, effectively removing Earth's magnetic field entirely, showed significantly accelerated development compared to controls, with effects visible as early as 1 day after fertilization. The researchers concluded the results were sufficiently robust to support a broader scientific consensus that weak magnetic fields exert measurable effects on basal physiology. This and other observations are intriguing enough that researchers continue investigating them. So what could this mean for medicine? This is where it's important to separate science from speculation. What we've discussed so far is a little bit about the research. Questions, mechanisms, experiments, not medical treatments, not clinical recommendations, not any proven therapies yet, but it's worth asking where this line of research could eventually lead. Imagine a future where we understand biological regulation at a much deeper level than we do today. A future where we can precisely monitor and influence specific biochemical pathways without relying solely on drugs. Could we someday use highly targeted electromagnetic signals to influence biological processes? Could we improve diagnostics by detecting quantum-sensitive charges inside of living cells? Could new technologies help us understand or better regulate the biological processes involved in metabolism, inflammation, or recovery? Weak magnetic field interventions are already moving toward clinical application. A century ago, the idea that a smartphone could continuously monitor your heart rate, blood oxygen levels, sleep patterns, and activity would have sounded absurd. Today, it's routine. Quantum biology could add a mechanism, a principled, physics-grounded explanation for why cells may respond to weak magnetic fields, and how to design interventions that target specific biochemical pathways with precision. Instead of stumbling on the effects through trial and error, as the field has historically done, a mechanistic understanding could allow researchers to rationally design interventions. So where does the science stand today? What we do know is that life is built on quantum components. We know that some biological reactions involve chemistry where quantum effects could, in principle, matter. And we know that scientists now have better tools than ever to explore these possibilities. This creates an opportunity to explore whether there are aspects of biology that we don't fully understand yet. Then quantum biology may prove to be one of the most fascinating scientific frontiers in the coming decades. If you'd like to follow and join this frontier with us, go ahead and subscribe to this YouTube channel, but more importantly, join our Discord community. Because some of the biggest discoveries may begin with just a simple question. What if we've been missing something? Let's find out.